In this example, we're going to explore ray trace reflections, the reflective surface shader, selective material assignment, and some scanline render options. So let's say our compositing task is to replace this reflection, or maybe we're removing a reflection, maybe it's in the windshield, maybe it's in the body. Let's see how we can do that. So we have our 3D scene. Now within that scene, we have our camera. We know we need to render from this camera, so we're going to use that same workflow where we create a camera and then plug that as our scene, and then want to grab that camera. So let's just filter down, as there is a lot of objects in this scene, to camera, and let's select that. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is to apply a material to this. So we want to bind it, and we want to create the reflective surface shader. Okay, so we'll plug that as our material. Now let's take a look at what this render will look like. So I'll plug in the camera and the scanline render. All right, so nothing shows up, and that is because we have nothing to reflect. So let's create a geoscene node, and then we want to create the environment light for this. So let's plug in our environment light, and now we have an output. Of course, our light is bright white, so let's plug in an HDRI, and then now we have a reflection. So a couple things is that we don't want everything to be reflective, so we're going to have to just do a quick modification. We'll copy and paste this GeoBindMaterial. Going to create a fill shader and plug this in as our material. For the fill shader, we want it to be black, so we'll just change this to 000. And then we want to be able to selectively pick where we want our reflection to show up. So if we jump to the GeoBindMaterial for it, now all 3D nodes that have masking capabilities have these quick filters, so we can just select what we want to apply this node to. In this case, we do want meshes, but I want to selectively pick. So what we could do is we could go from the hierarchy and pick, but there's too many objects, so I want to actually be a little bit more interactive and use the picker. So I'll select the picker, and let's say we want the hood, the body, the windshield, the rims, and I guess the headlights. And so we can see that we have this all filled up. So if we look at the scanline render now, we now have our reflection on the areas that we have chosen to. That's great. So a couple other things that we can do for this reflection is if we look at the areas where we have the object reflecting in itself, and you see this very similar to the ray render, you get a black pixels inside of there. And that is because the maximum ray depth is set to 1. This means there's essentially 1 bounce. So let's increase it to 2, and you'll notice that we have that now filled in. So this is great. We can enhance this even further, and we'll take a look at that as well. So if we explore the reflection shader itself, we can see that we have options. We can do a reflection percentage. Now, if we lower the reflection percentage, we'll notice that we start to get sort of these artifacts, because what we're doing is we're essentially turning this into glass from here. So we can adjust this by removing the specular cast, and this way this frees up the ability to use the Fresnel bias. So we can go in and we can make any adjustments along those lines. And also we can, you'll notice when we bring it down from up to 1, you can see that we are getting the black here, which is correct. But we could also enhance things by lowering the reflection percentage as well. So let's say that we are happy with this. We can go in now and clean up our camera samples. It's set to 1, but let's do something like 16, and we can have a nice clean render of our reflection. The nice thing about this is we have that flexibility of placing this reflection exactly how we want it. We can go ahead and move around that environment light, or maybe we just use this position to 60, and then we can go in and fine tune our reflection. So if we look at this in practice for this example, we have our render that came from 3D, and we have our render passes. So it's broken up into compositing passes here. And this area for the reflection, we then have our same setup that we just created here. And then we're bringing the reflection into the mix. and we're placing it on here. So when we go in and let's look at our end results here, we can adjust that reflection, dial it in, add compositing tasks directly to it. So we're able to utilize a 3D space, bring it into the 2D compositing workflow as well. Another example of this is when you are doing screen replacement and you want to get reflection if there's none available inside of the plate. Like if we look at this plate, you can see that we're adding screens in 3 spots. Now this one we can extract the reflection and place it back on top. These two, there are no reflections. So in this case, we can have that same workflow. So if we look at what's being done here, we have the camera tracked, and then we are placing our geometries into place with the HUDs that will be going on top. And then we also are branching off those same cards, adding the reflection material, and we're selectively doing that with the GeoBind. And then we have an HDRI, and then we are rendering out that reflection. So the advantage with this is that we have the reflection moving across the screens correctly to the tracked camera. And that's exactly what we want. So in this case, we can then go ahead and place those reflections on top. And if we just go in and enhance that, you can see there's a reflection there. And then going in and extracting the reflection from that previous screen and then placing it on top as well.